Israel is now facing a very interesting combination of challenges when it comes to the major interests of Israel's national security. First of all, we have a new administration in the United States that believes the Middle East can be pacified by dialogue with radical elements. Not only with radical elements, but that the radical elements' opposition to a stabilization of this region can be bypassed by dialogue, and you can bring about a more stable situation in the region. We have at the same time a new government in Israel that has not finally formalized what it wants to do. It knows what it doesn't want to do, but I doubt if they have a very clear idea about what they want to do. At the same time, we have the Europeans who act as they do very often irresponsibly. The moment they see that the Americans are not totally in Israel's corner, they present to Israel conditions that are impossible from an Israeli point of view, like making East Jerusalem conditioned on the goodwill of the Palestinians. And we have, of course, the Obama speech reflecting the American policy, Netanyahu's speech as an attempt to respond to Obama, and the Arab response to Netanyahu's speech that is particularly interesting, and I'll touch on it in a moment. What Obama basically said is that if Israel will come to some kind of accommodation with the Palestinians along the lines that Obama is suggesting, then he can bring about a group of Arab states and Muslim states that will support him when he deals with the more radical and more dangerous elements in the world today, primarily Iran, North Korea, Afghanistan, and others. I doubt if this is a realistic proposition, but from an Israeli point of view, once the American president says that this is what he wants to do, we cannot really dissuade him of it. This is something that he probably really believes in, that he needs at least an effort in the Palestinian department in order to bring about the more comprehensive policy. To this challenge by Obama, we've had the response of Netanyahu basically accepting a demilitarized Palestinian state. And what is particularly interesting, this is very new, is the kind of response we had from the Arab world. Now, what is new is not the substance of the Arab position, but the very clear expression of this substance that to people who are knowledgeable was known even beforehand. And before we even come to the very radical and counterproductive response of the Palestinians, let me say something about the Egyptians. President Mubarak said something yesterday that is very severe in its implications. He totally rejected what Netanyahu said because the idea of a Jewish nation state is unacceptable to Egypt, and because he says we will not take out from the Arab initiative the question of the so-called right of return. Now, there's been some debate whether the Arab initiative includes the right of return, namely the obliteration of the existence of Israel by demographic means, bringing in Palestinians in large numbers into the state of Israel. And some proponents of this initiative said they don't really speak about the right of return. Now Mubarak, a moderate Arab leader, a responsible Arab leader with a peace treaty with Israel, and he was expected to be the cornerstone, together with Saudi Arabia, of this Arab initiative, very clearly says right of return, which is something that no sane Israeli will ever consider. I mean, this is the one ultimate taboo that if Israel gives it up, it ceases to exist. And this demonstrates that we have a problem not just with the Palestinians, but with the Arab world. The idea that you can bypass the irresponsibility of the Palestinians by dealing with a collection of Arab and Muslim states is a very appealing idea, only it doesn't have any substance, because the very basis, the reason why Israel is willing to make concessions is to have a Jewish state and to prevent the right of return. Now, if you tell the Israelis, no matter what concessions you make, the one thing that is crucial to your existence, a Jewish state, and the rejection of the right of return is something that we don't accept, then the whole notion of having an all-Arab initiative is ridiculous and completely impossible. And this is the problem because not only Egypt, but Jordan, in public opinion in Jordan, is using very, very radical language against what Netanyahu demanded that practically all Israelis support. The kind of articles that the regime allows to be published in Jordan are extremely radical and offensive. And what you have on the Palestinian side is another reflection of Palestinian irresponsibility and I might say stupidity, because once the Palestinians realize that the Americans are not totally in Israel's corner and they see the Europeans adopting positions that are totally unacceptable from an Israeli point of view, they're not saying our bargaining position is improved, let us present a realistic proposition and then see if we can reach an agreement with the Israelis, but they speak in ultra-radical language and in insulting language and in uncivilized even language. And what you get from the official response of the Palestinians is basically saying, we will impose on you the Israeli need to commit political suicide by accepting the right of return and rejecting the notion of the Jewish state, or not accepting the Arab affirmation of a Jewish state. And if you're not willing to commit suicide, we have nothing to negotiate. In other words, what Israelis always knew, or some Israelis only learned recently, but most Israelis knew for a long time. You don't have a partner, and you cannot have in the foreseeable future a partner among the Palestinians, not only because in Gaza you have a repulsive group of anti-Semitic barbarians, and not only because the West Bank and the Gaza Strip cannot agree on the same leadership, and not only because Abu Mazen doesn't even represent the West Bank, but because even Abu Mazen, even the so-called moderates in the Palestinian camp, are not willing to accept any kind of settlement that will not lead to the destruction of Israel. So the whole notion of let's talk and then we'll get an agreement with the Palestinians that was never realistic is now less realistic than before. The ability to bypass it by bringing in the Arab world and the Muslim world is again unrealistic. So Israel has to ask itself what it wants to do. Now, the easy and counterproductive answer would be, we have nobody to negotiate with, so let's do nothing and let us use the Arab rejectionism in order to be rejectionist ourselves. But the vast majority of Israelis realize that partitioning the land of Israel is not a favor we do to the Arabs. They don't deserve to have a Palestinian state if you look at how they behave. The point is, we don't deserve to be stuck in the same state with them. So it is an Israeli interest and a Zionist interest to partition the land. And if you don't have a partner, you have to consider whether you can do it unilaterally. Now, of course, it would be much better if we could do it in agreement with a Palestinian partner or with an Arab partner. But when we come to the basics, a Jewish state and rejection of the right of return, we don't have a Palestinian partner, certainly not a Palestinian partner, and not even an Arab moderate partner, because the rejection didn't come now from Syria, it came from Egypt, from Mubarak personally. So Israel would have no other choice but to go back to the notion of we will leave most of the West Bank, even if we don't have a partner. Otherwise, we are stuck with it forever, and most Israelis understand that would be counterproductive to their own interests.